should be missing from committee.
And we are live, senators.
Here we are, back live. This is S25. We are the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, and we are joined by witness Holly Davies, I think out on the West Coast, 3 hours behind us. And we're going to introduce ourselves for the record, and then for you, not for the record, we know who we are for the record, for you, and then we'll ask you to offer your testimony. So let's begin with Senator Williams.
Senator Terry Williams from Rutland District.
All right, Senator Ginny Lyons from Chittenden Southeast, chairing the committee.
Senator Dave Weeks, representing Rutland County. Good morning.
Senator Martine Hewitt from Chittenden Central.
And Senator Hardy is also on the committee, and she will be back shortly, we hope. So thank you for being with us this morning. And we welcome your testimony, and please introduce yourself for the record on S25.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Holly Davies, and I'm a toxicologist at the Washington State Department of Health, which is out here on the West Coast in Olympia, Washington, our state capital. We work with our state environmental agency, which is called the Department of Ecology, on reducing toxic chemicals in consumer products. And thank you for this opportunity to talk to you this morning about toxic chemicals and products in S25. Before I tell you about our recent report to the legislature on chemicals and cosmetics, I want to mention that we're also concerned about exposures from other products in this bill. We started looking at phthalates in menstrual products as part of our phthalate action plan. And then we found there are other toxic chemicals that are known to be in menstrual products. And we're also concerned about products that are similar to menstrual pads, like incontinence products and diapers. All of these products are in contact with parts of people's skin that's more permeable than other areas of the body, so the chemicals are taken up by the body more. So we're particularly concerned about that exposure. Also, we have the Safer Products for Washington program, where we identify priority chemicals and then priority products that are significant use of the priority chemicals. And after we identify alternatives that are less hazardous and that are feasible and available, we're able to ban the priority chemicals in the priority products or require reporting by rule. We're in the rulemaking process for our first cycle of this program. It includes a ban on PFAS in indoor textiles and phthalates that are used as a fragrance in cosmetics. And in addition, PFAS in apparel is a priority product for our next cycle. So that's something we're also working on. It's important to consider chemicals that have been intentionally added in the manufacturing process, even if they don't serve a purpose in the final product. In our draft Safer Products rulemaking, we define an intentionally added chemical as a chemical that serves an intended function in the final product or in the manufacturing of the product or part of the product. An example of this is bisphenol A, or BPA, in can linings from our current rulemaking. So BPA is used in making the epoxy for the can lining, but it isn't used in the final product. There, BPA is reacted, but the remaining BPA is present as an unreacted monomer, and so it serves no function, but people are still exposed to it. And so that's different from other types of contaminants that are not intentionally added at any point in the manufacturing process. Because of this, we know the presence of the product, the presence of the chemical that's in the product. So when it comes to potentially harmful ingredients, cosmetics require extra scrutiny because we apply these chemicals directly to our bodies. Cosmetics is not just about makeup. I want to remind you the definition of cosmetics includes what we often call personal care products like shampoo, lotion, shaving cream, toothpaste, and deodorant that we all use. These everyday products can contain harmful chemicals. As cosmetics are applied, users are exposed to these harmful chemicals through our skin, by ingestion, and by breathing in vapors. When we wash them off, they go into our wastewater and are eventually released into the environment. The chemicals and chemical classes in this bill can disrupt our hormone systems, increase cancer risks, and harm brain development. We know the best way to protect human health from these toxic exposures is to remove harmful chemicals from cosmetics. Last year, we received funding from our legislature to work with communities of color to identify and test cosmetics for toxic chemicals. We talked to people about what they use and where they buy products, reviewed the scientific literature, and tested products for heavy metals and formaldehyde. We are in the midst of testing another set of products for asbestos and phthalates. In our first round of testing, we found lead, arsenic, and formaldehyde in some of the products we tested. The presence of lead in foundation and lipstick is particularly concerning because lead harms brain development and there's no known safe level. However, the good news is that levels were below a reporting limit of 1 part per million in 17 out of the 20 products we tested. This shows it's possible to make safer products and that the majority of manufacturers are doing so. While there's some lead contamination that's harder to avoid, such as in municipal water, I'd like to note that the national action levels for lead in drinking water are 10 part per billion, so orders of magnitude lower than the reporting limit of 1 part per million that we used in our testing. While there are only a few products with more than 1 part per million lead, because we don't buy our cosmetics products at random, the presence of lead in just a few products can be a significant source of exposure for people who use those particular products every day. Formaldehyde can be present in cosmetics either because it is used or because a different chemical is added that releases formaldehyde over time. In products that included a formaldehyde-releasing substance in the ingredients, we found formaldehyde in 26 out of 30 of those products we tested. What this means is that when formaldehyde releasers are used, people are often exposed to formaldehyde in the product. In most of the products we tested that listed a formaldehyde releaser, we found concentrations of formaldehyde above 200 parts per million, which can cause allergic reactions. Now, of course, allergic reactions are problematic, but the more consequential impact of formaldehyde in cosmetics is increased cancer risk. I'm particularly concerned about harmful ingredients in cosmetics that disproportionately affect people of color, and certain products are used more frequently by some groups than others. One example is that Black women use more hair straighteners and relaxers compared to white women. And while I'm saying women, the use of these products often starts in young girls. But the use of hair straighteners products by Black women has been associated with a higher breast and uterine cancer risk. Black women have higher incidences of breast cancer at a younger age and are more likely to die of breast cancer compared to white women. So thank you again for this opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I don't know whether we have your testimony yet in writing. Have you sent that to Alex?
I have not. We don't do that in Washington, so I wasn't sure I didn't know that was the process there. But I will send it to Alex.
Yes,
I'll do that.
please. Yeah, that would be helpful. You have a great deal of information embedded in your testimony, and I think it will be helpful for us to look at it separately. Have you had an opportunity to look at the bill and the sort of the specific sections or language in the bill? Can you make any comment there?
So I have looked at the bill. I'm not as familiar with your laws and how your laws interact with one part of the bill, kind of affecting one part of your code, another part, the other code. I noticed the part where you talked about excluding contaminants. And that's why I was talking about wanting to bring up in our rulemaking, we decided to include chemicals that are used in one part of the manufacturing process that get carried on through. We still know people are exposed to those. It's important to include those.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I did catch that. That's an important comment. Thank you.
And we are currently looking at a similar list of chemicals in our state legislature on cosmetics. And so I noticed that, again, it's a very important list of chemicals of carcinogens and chemicals that harm brain development.
Well, yeah, yes, thank you for that. I know that Vermont and Washington State have worked together in the past on these things. And I know I'm trying to remember which meeting it was. It was either in Washington State or Colorado or California, where I talked with some of your folks about our original legislation banning BPA when it was an emerging issue. So it's nice to know that there's some joint interests on the two sides of the country.
And I didn't see, I saw that you have a waiver for lead and 1,4-dioxane, which is another way of dealing with the issue of contaminants at low levels and trying to, that you didn't put a number on the contamination, but have left that up for your Department of Health in your bill. There's different
Yes.
ways to solve the problem of trying to balance what can be done about some contamination and then others that are harder to deal with.
Exactly. It's nice to have a supportive Department of Health, as you are doing with your folks in Washington. Committee questions?
No,
No.
it's good.
So it's only 7, what time is it out
It is-
there? You're 3 hours.
6:34.
6:34. No wonder we could get you earlier. We're ahead of schedule here. So we're glad that you made yourself available. Your testimony is very useful, and it would be terrific to have it in writing so we can post it.
Okay. Yes,
And,
I'll send it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time. And it sounds to me that your Department of Health, I'm thinking that you're doing a significant amount of research in testing and evaluating different products. What kind of a setup do you have for that? Must be pretty extensive.
So we work, as I said, we work with our environmental agency, the Department of Ecology. So the cosmetics testing was actually done by the Department of Ecology that has a product testing program.
Okay, so how robust is it? How many folks do you have doing that?
I think there's probably about 4 or 5 people who do in the product testing unit.
Okay.
And then there's other people outside. So the people I was working with are in their hazardous waste program.
Yes.
And we're looking at these chemicals and then kind of handing it over to the product testing people. So working with the product testing people to say, we didn't have a lot of time. I'm sure, I know from the legislator's perspective, it always seems like a lot of time when they give us money and ask for something by the end of the year, but it takes time to set these programs up. So a lot of it was what we could do given our short time frame for getting products and getting a lab who could test them.
Thank you. And so we'll continue to rely on one another. I'm particularly interested in the work that your lab folks are doing. So thank you for being available to us today, especially.
Okay.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
All right. So we have Matt Chapman with us.
Morning, Senator Lyons.
Matt, good morning. How's Albany?
Oh, it's all right. So I appreciate the committee allowing me to testify virtually. I wish I could be there in person this morning. So let me just, first of all, thank you. And I wanted to do basically 3 things in my testimony. And for the record, my name's Matt Chapman. I'm the Director of Waste Management and Prevention. And the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health work incredibly collaboratively on a strategy to try and address PFAS specifically, but harmful contaminants more generally, and the exposures that Vermont's environment and human exposure happen. I'd like to just spend a few minutes this morning going over 3 sort of major topics. One is helping give the committee hopefully a little additional information on the impacts of consumer products on a number of various waste streams and environmental exposure streams, so that you have that information and have an appreciation of some Vermont specific impacts. And the next is to explain how the work the committee is doing fits into the state's overarching strategy on how to manage and protect Vermonters and Vermont resources from PFAS exposure. And then lastly, give you a couple of suggestions and principles to think about in S25, including some specific suggestions. So first of all, I'd like to say that, and I'm going to speak largely to textiles and apparel because though cosmetics are certainly a direct exposure issue, textiles and apparel represent a significant contributor to a lot of the environmental exposures that we are seeing in landfills and wastewater treatment facilities throughout the state of Vermont. And, and they represent a large source of PFAS. In 2019, the Agency of Natural Resources required that the state's only operating landfill test waste material going into that landfill to determine what sources of PFAS are causing challenges with the leachate that then comes out of that landfill. And the three highest sources were bulky waste, which are basically furniture and mattresses that are covered by S25, clothing and textiles, which obviously are also covered by S25, and carpets, which are partially covered by the bill that you passed a couple years ago. So those commercial products represent a significant contributor to both the they have high concentrations of PFAS in them, and they represent a significant contribution of the amount of PFAS going into the landfill. And it's those consumer products that are going into the landfill that are creating challenges with the leachate that's coming out of the landfill. So certainly addressing PFAS in those consumer products is important. Secondly, in 2021, the Agency of Natural Resources did a study with respect to the district or the collection systems of two wastewater treatment facilities, Essex Junction and Middlebury. And to somewhat of our surprise, so I think this is an evolving understanding on our part, the significant contribution to PFAS in wastewater treatment facilities is not from industrial operations that are discharging to those wastewater treatment facilities, but rather from residential and sort of businesses that are there, sort of consumers. And we're basically at least operating at the moment under a working hypothesis that it's probably from people washing their clothes and from PFAS in cleaning products. So it's basically that apparel that people are putting in their washing machines. When they wash it, it's discharging to the wastewater treatment facility that's ultimately causing challenges with respect to the impacts on both biosolids, which are the solid portion of how the wastewater treatment facility treats its material, and then also the effluent that gets discharged. So I think that then just taking a step back from the Agency of Natural Resources perspective, managing PFAS in consumer products is a cornerstone of how we need to be dealing with PFAS generally. Dealing with PFAS through treatment on the back end of wastewater treatment facilities, drinking water systems, or at a landfill is a fairly inefficient and incredibly costly way to be dealing with PFAS. We need to be going upstream. We need to be dealing with it at the source, and that is as a part of our global strategy on how to deal with PFAS. That is a very central and important part of that strategy. I guess I would say two things. One is we would love, and I'm sure the committee would too, for the federal government to take a stronger leadership role in this area and use the authorities that they have to do more. And we're certainly working with our federal partners to do that, but certainly we'd encourage anything the committee could do to assist with that to go ahead and assist. But I think also when we take a step forward, one of the principles that we're trying to apply, mainly because of resource constraints in a small state, is mirroring either what another state has done going forward or working regionally. And I guess I'll share with the committee, and part of the reason I'm in Albany, I'm the chair of a working group of a regional organization that is coming up with a comprehensive approach to banning PFAS in consumer products. So New England states are working together right now to try and come up with an approach that we can all collectively agree to and have model legislation that we can provide to our respective state legislatures on how to come up with a framework to deal more broadly with PFAS and consumer products. And we've made a lot of progress with that. And my expectation is that we would be able to provide the committee with something by the beginning of next session, but we're still sort of too early to release it. We're going to have a public process around it, but I think it should provide a framework for everything. So with respect to that and jumping a little bit, there are a few concerns with respect to S25. And again, I'm going to focus on apparel, though cosmetics is certainly another area where it's a priority because of the direct exposure to humans by placing it on their bodies. With respect to apparel, I mean, we'd strongly recommend the committee think about modifying the bill slightly so that it more closely tracks with what the state of California is doing. And the main reason for doing that, frankly, is I think the issues that you raise, or that the previous witness from the state of Washington raised, is mainly the compliance efforts that are associated with ensuring that the products themselves actually meet the standard. When Vermont goes off and sort of does something that's similar but slightly different than what other states are doing, we have limited capacity and almost no capacity to do the appropriate compliance that we need to be doing. So linking up with other jurisdictions really helps us meet our compliance objectives from that perspective. So I guess I would flag two real issues that I reviewed in the bill that I think, if they were addressed, gets us in track with California. One is California defines what PFAS is slightly differently than the way the bill does. They're looking at a total organic fluorine standard for how they're measuring PFAS, and they are allowing some quote unquote de minimis amount of PFAS in apparel, but it's a measurable standard that I think is probably reasonable. And the timeframes are slightly different associated with that. They're requiring a sort of first tier standard in 2025 of 100 parts per million of total fluorine, and then a second tier standard in 2027 of 50 parts per million of total fluorine. And then the other, I think, sort of key difference is there's a separate sort of phase-in date for severe wet weather gear, which is sort of a more, I mean, the bill acknowledges it, but doesn't set a separate standard for it, S25. So that has a deadline of January 1, 2028. So those would be some of the recommendations with respect to the apparel. I mean, again, I guess with all things in the bill, to the extent that the committee could provide us the assistance as far as the administration and implementation of it by mirroring existing state legislation, that would be incredibly helpful. I know Washington is considering a set of cosmetic changes. I don't believe that they've been adopted yet. The state of Maryland has adopted a ban of PFAS in cosmetics, and it also includes a number of other constituents. I believe, Senator Lyons, it was the bill that was introduced last year or the year before is very closely modeled on Maryland's legislation. So that is another option the committee could consider, again, just to pair us up with other jurisdictions that are moving forward with these things. So I guess I'll pause there and just see if there are any questions or areas that the committee would like me to dive deeper into.
Thank you for your comments, and they do resonate with what we are looking at in an updated draft.
Right.
So particularly the dates, and trying to be more sort of systematic with in line with other states. So that is very helpful.
Great.
And thank you for your work on PFAS, by the way. I know that you've taken a leadership position on this for the state, and it's noticeable. It's great. I do have a question for you, and I'll let others ask a question. One of our committee members is very, as you and I have been in the past, about how do we stop going after individual compounds, and how do we look at sort of the group, and how can we do this, sort of collecting the chemicals without coming back every single year.
So it's challenging. just again, stepping back and giving the committee a frame of reference, right now, our existing analytical testing methodologies, how we use our science to basically see PFAS, we can see somewhere in the range of 40 perfluorinated compounds that are out in the environment. There are over 9,000 that are out and in commerce in some various way. So there are a lot of perfluorinated compounds that are out there being used that we can't actually even detect through our existing methodologies. I guess I would say I think that the approach that California is using, looking at total organic fluorine as a substitute for PFAS, is useful. It actually looks at a broader spectrum, looking at fluorinated compounds as opposed to looking for specific PFAS related compounds. I think that's useful. I think this is, unfortunately for the committee, this is all evolving. You know, part of the challenge with emerging contaminants is our understanding and ability to deal with them is emerging as well. So we're trying to get on top of all of this and address the ability to test and regulate and manage these as best we can. I will be honest, I don't think we have the best grip on it at the moment, as frankly a society.
Okay, so in terms of other chemicals beside PFAS, so where we have, phthalates or groups of, are we in the same similar situation, you think?
I don't. I mean, I think that, so I don't think we are. And I think that, EPA and sort of their defense, I know they're working right now on trying to develop, I shouldn't say never, they're working right now on developing categories of perfluorinated compounds that have similar characteristics that can be treated with similar treatment technologies, and basically using an indicator contaminant that as sort of the, for lack of a better word, the canary in the coal mine that would tell you that you need to do something because you have this class of perfluorinated compounds there. They're not there yet. They're still working on that approach. I think we expect it in the next several years, but we're not there yet.
Okay, all of which is to say, it's tough for Vermont to figure out how to move forward. But we do need to continue to look at sort of the private research that's going on in our institutions of higher education and others that might help the relationship between these chemicals and human health.
Absolutely. And I guess the other thing to just stress, Senator, it's hard to move forward, but I think that we have a lot of strength moving forward as a region and working in concert with other states. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I guess that's sort of the part of the core of what I'd like to just share with the committee. So I think that when we work with other states and are coming up with a framework on how to deal with this, it puts us in a much stronger position as Vermont to ensure that the public's protected and we're managing these constituents appropriately.
Well, thank you for that work. And I do know that that's true. And all the efforts that I've made and gone across the country with folks, other states are very interested in collaboration. It's difficult sometimes, we know that. And I know that sometimes California follows Vermont and vice versa, but it would be great if we were working in the same room as you are. And can I ask you which states you're working with?
Sure. It's New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire. So it's the Northeast region.
Yeah, it's a local group. A good group.
It is.
Yeah. All right. And questions committee, Senator Williams.
So do we have his testimony? Because you made a couple of recommendations for amendments.
Ask him.
Oh, okay.
I am happy to share my notes with the committee.
Okay,
Terrific.
thank you.
That would be great. Just send it along to Alex.
I will.
Because you did make some suggestions. I think the suggestions you made are ones that will be considering, so that's helpful.
Great.
Question of you, would it be wise of us to do a letter to the federal delegation asking them to We did that with the education.
Yeah, we have a number of issues, this being one of them. Make sure you keep track of that, write it down, and
Okay.
we'll put that letter together. I'll try and put that on the agenda next week, okay? To put a letter together for our federal delegation, because we have a number of issues, and this is right at the top of the list. Great suggestion, Senator. Thank you. Any other questions for Matt Chapman? Matt, what is your specific title? Because we don't have it right down here.
Sure, I'm the Director of the Waste Management and Prevention Division.
Good, I'm glad you're there.
Thank you, Senator.
Any questions for Matt?
No.
All right, and
Right.
are you, I just one quick question, are you engaged at all with the work that's going on to remove PFAS from the effluent from the wastewater treatment plant in Montpelier, or with the work that's going on to remove it before waste go into the landfill in Coventry?
I am.
Okay, good. Keep us posted.
I'm more than happy to, Senator. Yes.
Thank you. All right, well, that's good. I think we've asked the questions we needed to, and we'll get back. Please do send your written testimony.
I will. And if there are any other questions that come up, please, I am online, so feel free to reach out with any questions.
We will, and Senator Hardy's not here, and she may have a question about the last thing we discussed on the grouping the chemicals. So if she isn't satisfied with what she's seeing here, she can do that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Is Avi Carr available?
He should be joining us in just a moment.
Good, we'll just sit here. And how much is a moment? Do we need to go